it gets such less. Okay, shit. We're damn. We can go live, dude. Okay, fuck it.
Cool.
Let's do it. Okay, so if you go to my
I'm ready if you are.
Facebook page, we're going live. Yeah,
Perfect.
live and oh, we're live right now. I think. Can you check my Facebook page and see if I can't tell basically.
Your personal one?
Yeah.
Hold on, let me check it on here. This is usually more reliable for live.
Sure. No.
It doesn't say that you're live, so I don't think so.
Okay. It says I'm live right now. Interesting. We're gonna go with it because it says I'm live right now. And I maybe I'm not, but so my personal Facebook page is not showing I'm live. Interesting. What I can do is
Not that I see on you.
check. I'll share my screen. Watch this. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah. So this right here, you see how it says I'm live right now, and we've been
Yeah,
live
that's
for a
interesting.
minute. Yeah. Um.
Yeah, the last post that I see on your Facebook page right now, at least that I can see, is something from Jason Hernandez.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be it. Okay. Interesting.
I'm sure it's working and it's just not coming through online
Oh shit! You see this, bro?
public.
Bam.
You had it for only me previously.
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah.
know.
There we go. Now I see
Oh
it.
shit.
Yeah.
Oh shit. All right. First live podcast ever streaming on Facebook Live with the one and only, the one and only, the one and only, the one and only Brit Earl Abney. Hey, man.
How's it going, man?
Yeah. So for those of you listening, quick update. This podcast, I target it. I try to generate content for people like engineers, rational people, people who are into self-improvement, people who are interested in growing small businesses, people who are logical, rational, these types of things. And what came to mind with Brit, aside from the fact that freaking known this guy since I was literally 2 years old, he's one of my best friends, this extremely high caliber person, was his Facebook engagement. I just checked the other day and he was talking about it was Black Panther, I believe. The movie just came out. And I know a lot of people are trying to find traction online. They're trying to generate engagement. And I think Britt had like 500 comments on Facebook. So, this guy knows how to draw a crowd in. And we're going to dive in a bunch of different stuff today about Brit, about his mindset, about everything. It's gonna be fun. We're just gonna hop right in and kind of go for it. Like,
That's a lot to lay bare in public. Wow.
yeah, man, yeah. So we can just start off with, dude, the controversy. Not the controversy, but you write some controversial stuff. Not controversial.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair word. I'm not going to try and hide that at all. I think that's part of the reason that it draws such a crowd is that it's not necessarily something where you look at it and you go, oh, duh, like obviously, like that doesn't require any thought. It's something that people are going to, in general, either feel very excited and supportive about or feel very much like they disagree and they want to voice a disagreeing opinion on it. So yeah, it's controversial for sure.
Yeah. Now, do you get scared when you are about to post?
I don't know if scared is the right word. There is a level of apprehension before certain posts, not necessarily because of fear, but more of like, what does my day look like today? Because I know that interacting in this is going to require at least a certain amount of time. And so there have been some times where I'll have something written out and then I'll second guess and think to myself, I probably don't have the time to invest in this today that this deserves. And so I'll literally just delete it and get rid of it. I don't think that there's really fear, though. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You post something and someone raises some criticisms and you realize, wow, I was really wrong, right?
What if?
Okay, like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I know a lot of people are afraid of getting negative feedback, myself included, and I'm sure you've gotten it. Like,
oh yeah. I have a lot of friends on Facebook that do not shy away at all from telling me that I have no idea what I'm talking about or that I'm really wrong for this reason or that reason. Yeah, I get a lot of negative feedback.
When you first started posting, when you first started posting, did that hit you hard or not really? Did you get over the that negative criticism? It holds so many people back. Like, what's your mindset around that?
Yeah, it probably used to bug me a lot more. I've kind of gotten to this point where I try not to like attach myself to the beliefs that I have on pretty much anything. There's a few core beliefs that I really consider like to be important to me, but most of the things I believe, they're not me. It's not who I am. And so if I had to abandon a belief, that would not make me question my identity in any way. And so for that reason, I don't think that negative feedback is really an issue, right? Because again, what's the worst that can happen is someone is going to say, you're wrong. They might say it in an insulting way. And, at first that kind of, it hits you a little bit, but you can quickly brush that off and realize that they just weren't presenting their criticism in a polite manner. You look through that, you see what they were saying. And if they had some accurate criticism, then worst happens is you say, look, I was wrong, or maybe at worst, my belief needs some tweaking or refinement. So I don't think that it really makes me scared, at least not more than the usual few seconds when someone comes on and throws an insult or something.
Yeah. So what's it called? So like you get an insult, right? And what happens? Right. I could see like, oh, this person, what if they bring up like a valid claim, but they're rude? Like, how do you separate rudeness from a valid claim? Like this whole thing of dealing with online people and having a discussion is really difficult. Like people are just downright rude. And, how do you respond and not lose your cool? Because you reply to the comments. You are in there, debating and standing up for yourself. And often, and so there's this energy flying. How do you kind of, let's say someone throws some rude energy at you. How do you stay cool?
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of like what I was saying before, initially I try to look past the way they said it. Initially, I try to just kind of peer through sort of the feeling of it, and I try to see the content of it. If it's only a one-time thing. If I see a person that's being consistently rude, not necessarily just to me, but to pretty much anyone, I will actually call them out on that. Especially over the last probably year and a half to 2 years, I've started to create and maintain a certain standard of decorum or politeness on my Facebook page. And that goes for regardless of who they're talking to, whether it's slung at me, whether it's slung at someone I disagree with, or whether it's slung at someone I agree with. It doesn't matter. If they're being significantly rude and consistently, I will say like, hey, you're going to have to, calm down that attitude if you want to stay on my page. If you don't, that's fine. Like you don't have to be here. You can talk however you want on your own page, but on my page, you're going to talk in a fairly polite way. And if you don't think that you can, then I'll start deleting your comments and eventually block you. I have no issue with someone being here, disagreeing with me. You can disagree with me all day long. You can disagree with other people all day long, but you're going to do so fairly politely. If it's just a one-time thing, like a one insult, especially if it's not a super bad insult, like maybe a little word snuck in there, right? As opposed to something much more crude, like, F you, you bastard. then I'll often let that slide and I'll try to look through that to just the content. But you can tell certain people come on and they're warriors, right? They're ready to attack. They want to fight.
Yeah.
And so talk to those people and be like, look, that's not what this is. And if that's who you want to be, if you want to fight, that's fine. Go to another page, because this is a place for polite discussion, disagreeing, controversial discussion, but polite.
Do you have fun?
Disagreement.
You gotta have fun doing that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If I didn't enjoy it, I don't think I'd be as motivated to do it all the time. Yeah, I have a good time.
Yeah. What are, just so the audience, kind of whoever's listening right now, what are some of the topics you take a stand on?
Take a stand, like just discuss, like bring up.
Yeah.
Like
what are some revolving themes?
A lot.
Like there's Christianity and atheism and the dance between those two. There's GMOs. There's
it's a huge range. I talk about philosophy of religion a lot. Hold on one second, my cat is on the screen.
Meow.
But yeah, so I talk about philosophy of religion a lot, and that covers a huge amount of topics. So that covers God, atheism, Christianity, morality, philosophy of mind, Jesus, historicity, you name it. That covers a ton. But I'll also talk about politics. I'll talk about things that generally require skepticism. So I'm pretty critical, unabashedly, of like conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists in general. So like the anti-vaccination movement, 9/11 truthers, flat earthers, people that think the GMOs are super bad for you. I'm pretty critical of those movements, and not in a way where I come out and I'm like, you're a bad person or you're a dumb person if you feel this way. It's more of a look. I just don't think that there are facts to support those movements.
Yeah.
Totally. I think it's important we discuss them.
Totally. I like how you're putting that, like, it's not about you, it's the facts. I think that's a core theme of what I'm hearing with you, even when you make an insult or whatever. It's not about me, it's about the issue at hand. Yeah. Right.
And separate the individual from the belief or the claim, because they're not the same thing. We always like to say, like, I am my beliefs, or you get really attached to your beliefs like they're part of you, and they're not. Yeah. They're definitely not a part of you.
Well, how do you divorce from your beliefs? How do you, so let's take a belief. Let's say I believe the earth is flat. And
right.
I that's true. I believe the earth is flat, man.
Right.
Yeah, right. Well, how about this? I believe the earth is round. I believe the earth is round. How do you, and then someone says, whatever. I don't know. What's the question? The question is, how can you help someone? How can you facilitate someone detaching from their belief? Because I know we all deal with people who are stuck in black and white, Democrat, Republican, this and that, blah, 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 gun rights or no gun rights. It's black and white. And we, as emotionally intelligent people, kind of have some responsibility in the certain circumstances to help the other person see a little bit differently, maybe a more nuanced picture. How do you help someone see differently?
So that's really hard, because it's extremely hard to do it for yourself, right? It's a ridiculously difficult task to get yourself to appreciate more nuance, to see things differently, to divorce yourself from your beliefs. So to get someone else to do it, in my mind, is even a step above that in terms of the level of challenge. It is difficult. There are a handful of ways. I will start out by saying, to some degree, some people you probably won't be able to reach. So realizing which people you might be able to get and which people you might not is important from the beginning. There are some people that they're not willing to have a nuanced conversation. They're not willing to change their mind in the light of new facts. But for those that are, let's assume you're talking to someone where it's like, this person is fairly rational. We all have biases, but this person, they would admit that their belief was flawed if they were shown that, right? Let's assume you're talking to someone like that. A handful of ways. One of the most important, I think, is you humbly admitting that you're wrong when you are shown wrong.
Yeah.
If they feel trusting that you will do that, they're more likely to do it as well. If you stick to your guns on everything, if you never admit you're wrong, even when it's pretty obvious you are, even when the facts are against you, and you still just double down, they are more likely to do the same thing. Then they're going to say, well, he's not caving at all, so I'm not going to cave, right? The more he doubles down, the more I'm going to double down. If you show humility, if you show, look, that belief wasn't important to me. What was important to me was the facts and the truth. And I'm willing to divorce myself from that belief if reason shows that I should. I have found that they are much more likely to do the same, not necessarily in that conversation, but maybe in a future conversation. So like anybody who's been on my page knows that the majority of the people that interact with me are regulars. And there's a lot of them. There's probably 40 or 50 of them. But they're regulars. They come back a lot.
Yeah.
They're involved in those discussions, and they've been on this page before. They not only know me, but they know the other regulars. And so it's they start to realize what people have intellectual humility and are willing to admit they're wrong, and which people don't, and maybe are not as worth the time.
I like that. I really like that. I can resonate with that personally, because here I am trying to grow a brand, and I know that controversy is a way to get attention, and I know other people who are trying to grow brands also realize that, but it's easy to keep things super light and fluffy and positive and not risk anything. And I think for all of us who are trying to grow their own brands, we can learn something from this intellectual humility, or being willing to back down. I think a lot of the fears people have about putting themselves out there tend to be overblown once they put themselves out there. Meaning, like, once someone stands up for themselves and has a conversation about some polarizing issue, and they admit something and they listen and give the facts, that's it. Nothing bad happens. Is that true?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, you're right. It seems a lot scarier to think about doing it than it is to do it, even if the worst happens. And that's kind of what I was trying to say before, is the worst isn't that bad, right? Yeah. Like, okay, so someone calls you out. Maybe they're rude to you. Maybe they're right. Maybe they called you out on something that, wow, that's a good point. And a lot of people saw it, right? Like all these people online saw me get called out fairly.
Yeah.
Okay. So what, right?
It's terrifying.
Then
Jesus Christ, that's terrifying.
It's scarier but it's scarier to think about it.
I'm kind of being facetious. I'm kind of being facetious right there.
Yeah. But no, you're right. Because I think that it is terrifying to think about yourself. Yeah. But it's not that bad when it happens. It's really not. I've had it happen many times. When you post hundreds of controversial posts over the years and you have a lot of intelligent friends, every single individual is going to get their fair share of like, hey, shit, like I got called out, and that was good. It was good criticism, right? Like it wasn't just that he was right. He was right for the right reasons, or she really, poked at an error there that I've been overlooking for so long. And wow, like good job.
Yeah.
And I find that it's much less scarier in the moment when you admit it. It's actually freeing. It's one of the greatest feelings to just say like, yeah, that's a good point. And I think that I'm going to rescind what I said before. I think I'm going to admit that what I said before was either a completely wrong claim or needs a lot more nuance than I gave it initially.
Dude, this thing right here of being able to admit when you're wrong applies, oh my God, so much beyond Facebook controversial posts.
Yes.
Like,
it does.
I think it's one of the number one killers of growth, of personal growth and relationship growth. People can't admit when they're wrong. Like, they literally have a blocker on it. And I know you said earlier, like, some people are just not open to change. And what we're kind of talking about right now is this feeling of like, that felt good to admit I was wrong. Like, that's a big shift.
It does.
That's a big shift.
It feels really good.
Yeah. Feels liberating. Ooh.
It's kind of surprising how good it feels, especially the first couple times. The first couple times you do it, you're like, wow, that was kind of fun.
That's what Facebook Live gets like too. You know, I by the way, if
Really?
people are commenting and liking on Facebook Live, I can't see right now. Um, just heads up.
Yeah, through the Zoom.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So something that you said struck with me a while back. You said you don't just post uh, any controversial thing. You had to believe in it strongly enough to, you're like, do I actually believe in this enough to stand up for it?
Right.
That was kind of how I
Yeah.
understood that.
Yeah, because I won't. I generally won't post on something that I'm not super wrapped up in. If I'm posting on it, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. It's not just something that crosses my mind for a brief second and then 15 seconds later it's on Facebook. If I posted about something, it means I've really meditated on this topic, with one exception. Sometimes if I am struggling to find answers to it, or if I'm struggling to get the right way of thinking, I'll post it as a question. Like, hey, can someone help me out with this? Or can someone explain to me this? It'll be very obvious that I'm not posting my opinion. It'll be obvious that I'm asking. But for the most part, if I post something without a question mark at the end, it's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I have, at least in my mind, a well-developed perspective on it. Doesn't mean I'm not willing to change that perspective, but it's not a perspective that I came to quickly. It's one that it's like, this is something that I know at least some of the ins and outs on.
So you're like kind of, I imagine you like driving to work or something, and you're like, damn, that Black Panther or whatever. Like, are you like, when you think about something, is it kind of like a tossing and turning in your head, and you're like, huh, this is kind of bothering me? Is that kind of your process, or how does your process go?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a tossing and turning, and there's a thinking about it, and then I'll kind of go down these hypothetical paths in my brain where I'll think of something, and then I'll think, well, what would someone on that felt the other way, or who is on the other side, so to speak, what would they probably say to that? And then how might this side respond? So I'll almost have like a cursory version of the debate in my brain real quick, and what would both sides probably say? And that can actually really help me, because then I'm almost like trying to stand back and look at like two avatars of the sides of the debate, and almost like a judge, and think like, which side of this do I find more convincing, given the strongest arguments that I can picture in my brain, given what I know about this debate right now. And that will often bring me to greater clarity as to where I lie with it, right? If I sit there and I try to make the best arguments in my own mind for a debate topic for both sides, then I'm probably going to, at least to some degree, realize which side I find more convincing, because I've been down the path, at least to the degree that I understand. And often I'll post something and it's like, points will get brought up that I'd never even thought of, and that can change it. But I've been down it at least a little bit, right? I've thought about, I expected you to say that, or I expected her to say that, or I expected that to be your point on that. I've already thought about that. This is what I think. And then you can kind of go into the exchange having a lot of thoughts developed on it already, which helps you to solidify where you are on the topic. So yeah, I would say that when I do post something, I am already quite
This
involved.
Is a pretty advanced metacognitive skill. I mean, the ability to empathize and to create visual representations of conversations, hugely important skill. I'll do that too when I am planning out like a difficult conversation. I'll think about, okay, like here's something that hurt me, that didn't feel right with me, something that person said. I gotta express my boundary, but also as I express my boundary, how is that person gonna hear me express my boundary?
Right.
Because they might, if I
Right,
come out
'cause you
really
should have
aggressive,
some
they're gonna
conception.
get, defensive.
And yeah, because you should have some conception of how they might respond going into it. And part of the problem is, if your conception is totally wrong, then you can get caught off guard. But yeah, you should think about how they might respond to the things you're saying. That shouldn't be brand new to you going into it. Yeah.
Totally.
That can be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a certain level of empathy there. Is peanut in the bag?
All right, I got
cat
some questions. I got some questions too. You
Yeah.
did some live debates too. What's the difference between live debating, like and comments. I imagine in the comments you can kind of compose yourself, and people might
Yeah.
be thinking, wow, it's really easy to debate on Facebook. Like, you're not there. It's easy to have this dance and imagine other people's perceptions. You're not there. But have
Right.
you dealt with people in real situations, and how does that go?
Right. So yeah, and you're right. There's huge pros and cons to both. But I think that you can kind of narrow it down to basically one category for each. So I've had live debates like what we're doing right now, but in debate style. And then I've also obviously had, debates or discussions about controversial topics in person, right, over a beer or coffee or something.
Yeah.
And the biggest advantage to Facebook is kind of what you said. There's composition, so people can go get their sources. They can really phrase themselves the way that they want to phrase themselves. They don't feel rushed. They don't feel like they can go back and edit a sentence right after they've written it. So people are more composed and they have their sources right there. And you can hold people to their word. You can't say, "Oh, I never said that." It's like, you really did, right? It's right here. So that's the advantage to Facebook. The disadvantage is what Facebook lacks that a live debate doesn't, and that's the human element. Yeah. When you're on a Facebook debate, you often get to the point where you feel like you are in like a chess match with AI. You don't see yourself discussing with another human being. You just see their points coming through and how to counter their points or agree with them. It's like they're not a human being. They're a generator of argument or topic.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do that in live debates or in person. You don't have the ability to ignore the humanity. And so in general, things don't get as aggressive with live debates or in-person debates. On Facebook, people drop the F-bomb and insults in like the first comment a lot. That never happens in live debates or in person. You never meet up with a buddy for beer and within 5 minutes you say, "That was fucking stupid. How could you believe that?"
Yeah.
That never happens.
Yeah.
Because you're both humans and you can see that you're both humans and you don't have the ability to forget that.
Yeah. Totally.
So those are kind of the big pros and cons, the differences there. And here's the other thing too, and I learned this a couple of years ago. Once you've met someone in person and had a discussion in person, even if it's just over Skype or something like we're doing now, it's a lot harder to see them as just like AI or a argument generator after that. You have more empathy for the person behind the screen if you've met them behind the screen previously.
Yeah, totally.
And so I strongly encourage people that it's like, if you debate with this person online, you should, if at all possible, meet them at least once.
Yeah.
And talk with them. It will change how you discuss. I promise.
What if you're...
And I have. Lucky for me, I've gotten to travel a lot for work and just personal. And I've met a lot of my debate sparring partners who live all over the country. Like I went out to Salt Lake City about a year ago, and I faintly remember that one of them was from Utah. So I met up with my buddy Marshall, who I'd never met anywhere except online. We'd been, kind of sparring online for a couple of years, and we had beers and we discussed in person. And our relationship was better after that, even when we were seriously disagreeing with each other. And Marshall is not the only person that I've done that with. I've done that a lot.
How do you start that conversation? Because I know a lot of people are stuck. It's their fault. I'm not going to admit I'm wrong because it's their fault. They started it. I'm not going to, I'm not going to sit down for a beer with that dude. Hell no. That person was rude to me. And here you are sitting down with beers with your debaters. I don't know if they're rude to you, but how do you, what was that conversation like? Hey, Marshall, do you want to grab a beer?
Yeah, I think it was like, "Hey, you live here, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'll be there. I'd love to meet up for beers." I think he was pretty receptive to it. So I think to a certain degree, it requires some understanding between both of you. It requires a little bit of putting whatever spars you had behind you for at least for a moment. And if you're both not willing to do that, it might not work as well. So there's this trust element, right? And there's this trust element that you can't get past. But such is human relationships, right? If both of you aren't willing to give and take a little bit, it's never going to work. I mean, that's not just the same with debate sparring partners. That's marriages, that's siblings, that's you and your parents, that's you and friends. Yeah, you need a little effort from both sides. And if you don't get a little effort from both sides, I don't have a magic solution for that. It won't work.
Yeah, that's true. Kind of what I'm hearing from you is in regards to the intellectual humility too, but what's it called? Like humility, but like willingness to not be right or something like that. Willingness to not be right or to be wrong or to kind of let things go. There's this willingness, okay, like we might disagree. I'm willing to forget that right now. Okay, I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong. I'm not stuck. I'm even though it's uncomfortable. I'm. Is it uncomfortable to be willing to open up, willing to be wrong, or willing to let things go? To me, as I think about that, I'm like, I don't know. It seems like it's a bit uncomfortable. Like becoming vulnerable is a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, you feel bare. You feel bare for sure.
Bare.
And especially if the other person, if the other person isn't empathetic and receptive to it, it can be even worse, right? Like, let's say you go, look, I think you're right. I think I was wrong. And if they turn around and they go, you're fucking right. You were wrong, you idiot, or something like that, right? It makes you feel worse, and it makes you less inclined to want to do that again in the future. So it's equally important too, when people admit they're wrong, to be gracious about it, right? To give them positive support for that. Be like, hey, I really appreciate that you were willing to do that. That was really big of you.
Sure.
Because if they didn't do that to you, you might feel disincentivized. So don't be that disincentivization for them. That's a word, right? Sure. Disincentivization. Yeah. But yeah, so there's kind of a couple of strategies that I see there.
There we go.
Strategy one is like, if you really do realize you're wrong, like, hey man, they just have good points, admit it. But that's not always going to happen. There will be a lot of conversations where you don't think you're wrong. But if you're being honest with yourself, you should be able to tell that the other person truly doesn't either, right? Not every conversation is going to be so obvious that one person is stubbornly sticking to their guns. There will be conversations where it's like, wow, to the core of my being, I think I'm right on this. But I think they feel the same. I don't think they're being stubborn, right? I think they really think they're right too. And in those situations, the second strategy is saying, look, I think that I'm okay leaving this conversation where we are. You've raised your points. Let me think on them. I've raised mine. Please think on them. I still disagree with you right now, but I'm willing to kind of drop this conversation right here. Maybe we can come back to it in a few days, a few weeks, whatever, after we've thought about it or learned more and more information comes out. No hard feelings, right? And just walk away from it at that point, because you'll get to a point where certain conversations are no longer productive for you, them, or anyone watching. And it's okay to not have the last word, to not get resolution on it, right? To not say, I won or you won or someone admitted it. To just say, look, we didn't convince each other, and that's okay. Still like you, still a good person. Hopefully you still like me. Till next time, right?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people really don't like doing that. And that also is very freeing to just say, look, we're not going to come to terms on this one, and that's okay.
Yeah, that is freeing. When people don't have that option, they only have escalation. More anger, right. More argument. They don't know how to back down. Well,
and they want to attribute malice where there might just be sincere disagreement. They don't want to admit that you sincerely still disagree. It's like, you're being stubborn, right? You're being dishonest. There's no way you can't see my point right now, right? It's like, don't be so quick to attribute malice to someone who disagrees with you. People will often, sincerely, to the best of their understanding, disagree with you. That doesn't mean they're being dishonest.
Was there ever a time when you took a step back, you laid yourself bare, and someone said, well, screw you, basically?
Yeah. Yeah, and I generally don't talk with those people for extended periods of time, right? Those are not the people that are regulars. Those are not the people that I spend a lot of time engaging, because those people have not shown me that they're willing to lay themselves bare as well, that they're willing to show compassion and empathy. The people that I engage with regularly are people that respond well when you admit you're wrong, and that appreciate when you respond well and they admit they're wrong. Again, these are human relationships, and you have to be trusting, and there has to be give and take. And for partners, so to speak, that are not willing to do that, they don't end up being people that I talk with a lot.
Yeah.
The people that are on the page, part of the reason I have 500, 600, 700 comment threads regularly is because it's not just me. There are dozens of other people that over the years I have fostered good relationships with, that even when we all disagree, and we disagree a lot, they are respectful and they are conscientious and they're compassionate and they're sometimes willing to admit they're wrong. And when I admit I'm wrong, or when people that agree with me admit they're wrong, they are gracious about that.
Yeah, you're setting the
people
tone.
that are on my
You're setting the tone.
They have met standards.
You're setting the tone. That's such an interesting thing. Like, you have a little community around you. It's cool. It's legitimately cool. Like, you're a leader in your own right of however you want to call it, respectful debate.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, there's tons of people like me, and we just all generally cross paths, right? It's just like and their pages they look like mine. When you go to their pages, they have hundreds of comment threads, right? So yeah, I think that these people online, they tend to find each other, right?
Yeah.
Because at some point you'll be on someone's thread and commenting, and you'll realize, look, this person's intelligent and respectful, and they disagree with me, and that's interesting. And then you'll add each other, and then you'll have wonderful conversations in the years to come, hopefully.
Yeah. So is there in this day and age of CNN pandering to their audience to write, Fox pandering to their audience, we have a polarization of the news, right? Where it's, we all know that this is happening, that people have preferences to see the news that conforms to what they already believe and everything. But here in these social media channels, there are these little nest eggs of these people who are having intellectual debate. I do want to back it. We'll talk about this in a little bit before we come back to strategies. But it's interesting that maybe there's hope in our society for civil discourse. Or maybe not. Maybe that's a fool's dream.
No, I think there is. There's not hope for it to be widespread, but there is hope for it to exist. I think that if you have the hopes of society being a bunch of super rational people and lots of people, or the majority of people having civil discourse, that's a pipe dream. But if your hope is just to say there are some people out there that are willing to have this rational, respectful discourse, I see it every day. People that disagree with me on so many topics, and we are legitimately friends. Again, I've met these people after only being friends with them online, right? Like Marshall, I have like 10 people like that, where I only knew them online. We disagree on almost everything, and I've met them in real life, and we're friends. We're legitimately friends because of our frequent civil disagreements. Like, literally, our friendship is based on our discussions where we're almost always on opposite sides.
Yeah.
And it's a good friendship. Like, there's probably 4 or 5 of these people that I talk to on a daily basis. Got a guy named Josh that comes to mind, Rob Anderson, Marshall Pulliam, the guy from Utah that I mentioned earlier. I have a lot of people where it's like, we disagree on almost everything, and we have a legitimately good friendship.
I remember this one time I was hanging out with you at in El Dorado Hills, and you invited several people out to this bar, and I was shocked by the crowd that came. You had bodybuilders and conservative Christians, and people like me, yoga people, and self-help people like me, and the quintessential moment was, I forget his name, but it was your dad and some guy grabbing a beer at the back.
Tim Kennedy.
Yeah. Dude. It's like this is the
Yeah.
energy that Brit puts out there. This like the exact opposite ends of the spectrum. We got a proclaimed atheist and a proclaimed conservative Christian laughing together, like totally engaged, listening to each other's and totally disagreeing too, but like loving the process.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Tim's another one of those people. Met Tim online, and I went wine tasting with Tim for a whole weekend. He's a great guy. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
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 You're right. That is yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And me and Tim have in particular have butt heads a lot. But Tim is a great guy. I really liked him. And yeah, I remember the dinner that you were talking about. That was a fun night.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So what's we talk about EQ on this thing. What's a challenging moment you've been through? Emotionally challenging moment you've been through?
Yeah. I was just talking to Ellie about that. I was kind of trying to like wire through my brain about what was the best one to discuss. And we kind of came up with one together. And she's right. I didn't really handle this one particularly well. It's about a year ago, and we got in a fight, and I don't even remember what it was about. It was probably about nothing, but we just got on each other's nerves and turned it into a bigger fight. And she was very riled up and wanted to basically have a fight, right? She wanted to talk about it, but we were both very emotional at that point. And I was like, no, I'm going to bed. Right. I was at the point where it's like, I don't want to do this so much that I'm basically running away from it.
Okay. I hear you.
I kind of rolled over and closed my eyes and started to fall asleep. And that made things way worse. It made her even more upset. We ended up having that fight that night, which we needed to. And it was a lot worse because I rolled over and said, I'm not doing this. Wanting to avoid confrontation is a great thing, but if you do it to the point that you run away from a fight that needs to happen,
yeah,
it's just going to make it worse.
Got it.
There's a book I'm listening to right now by Dr. Jordan Peterson, who anyone's watching this right now, I'm sure you've at least heard his name. And he has a chapter, and this is a little bit hyperbolic, but there's an underlying truth there where he says there is little in a marriage that is not worth fighting over. And what he means by that is that you're going to be living with this person for the rest of your life. But this applies to any long-term relationship. It's like if something starts to bug you consistently, talk about it. And that might turn into a fight. And you need to have that fight potentially, or you need to at least open up that opportunity where you might have that fight, because it is better to talk about it now than to bury it and let it get worse the next day, or much worse 10 years later, right? Those kind of things that you bury lead to divorces. They lead to the dissolving of friendships. They lead to never speaking to your father again. Those are the things that you don't want to bury. So yeah, that one. I handled that one really poorly. Luckily for me, my stubborn wife made sure we had that fight that night. So it ended up only being slightly worse 10 minutes later, right? But it could have been way worse a year later. It could have been way worse 5 years later.
Yeah.
So I handled that poorly.
Fair enough. And kind of the lesson you learned from that was, again, coming back to this willingness thing, the willingness to have a fight even. The willingness to have integrity or whatever, be able to say the truth. Be able to say the truth.
Right, because sometimes you're thinking that and you're like, look, I know what I'm going to say is going to piss you off. I know that what I'm feeling right now is not something you're happy about. And they're probably thinking the same thing, right? I know what I'm going to say is going to piss you off. So you're both are like, I don't want to do that. Sometimes you need to, though. Yeah, sometimes you need to have that willingness and have a very uncomfortable conversation to avoid disaster down the road.
Yeah, and it brings people closer, too. I mean, it's interesting. And growing up, I didn't really have much yelling around. And so learning how to be more assertive and to take a hard stand that pisses people off or that leads to conflict, that's been a personal edge for me, too. Like leaning into pissing someone off. Like a people pleaser, right? Like that's my kind of my default.
Right.
I've had to, lean into and being like, no, I gotta speak my truth. I gotta be willing to push. I gotta be willing to fight. Like fighting can be damn good.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's that hard balance, right? You don't want to fight over everything. You don't want to be the person who turns everything into a fight, but you also don't want to never talk about things that mean a lot to you. You want to be able to have fights when fights need to happen.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard to find, that wherever that middle line is.
Yeah. I was thinking on the ride over here, like just random thoughts about emotional intelligence, but it's so nuanced. It's like, okay, you got to be willing to back off there, but you got to willing to fight there. You got to, you know,
Yeah.
there's this dance where it's like,
Well, it's not just nuance, it's nuanced in individual ways depending on the relationship, right? You can't even strike the same balance with, say, your wife as you can with your brother or your parents or your lifelong friends. They're all going to be very different. So not only is it nuanced, it's different nuances all over the place, depending on the person, the relationship.
yeah. And when you start to think
It's
about all these nuances, it's just like, ah.
yeah,
But if you throw
it's
yourself,
hard.
it's hard. It's hard. I think like
Yeah.
that's the lesson I kind of want to touch upon real quick too. A lot. I'm trying to speak to nerds. I'm trying to speak to people who are logical, and when they can in their mind they can sense this web, this jungle of social dynamics. Their intuition. They're like, yeah, it's a freaking jungle out there. And they don't quite. Some people are very suave and everything, but some people they they're scared because they sense this like these infinite nuances and this skill set, this rich and deep and frustrating skill set of dealing with people, and it's just easier for them to play video games. It's just easier for them to code a computer. It's just easier for them to like go work. And I have the same tendency
Yeah,
too.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So my first response to that would be, unfortunately, they're right. It is.
it is tough.
It is easier. Humans are fucking hard,
Yeah,
and maintaining and balancing proper social relationships, a lot of social relationships. I mean, even if you're not a super social person, at minimum, you're going to have one or two best friends. You're going to have siblings. You're going to have parents. You're going to have probably a romantic relationship. So that's like what, a half a dozen right there if you're a fairly non-social person. So at a minimum, you're balancing all of these relationships in your life. So the first thing I'd have to say to that is, unfortunately, they're right. The caveat, the major caveat there is that it's arguably the most important thing in the world. When people look back at their life, people that have happy lives, the number one indicator or influence over having a happy life is successful social relationships. It's not where you live. It's not how much money you make. It's not even what you do. I know a lot of people talk about, choose the career you love, and not that that's not important, but it's not the peak factor. The peak factor, according to all of the research that I've seen, is successful social relationships. And so if you choose to code instead of doing the harder thing, if you choose to play video games instead of doing the harder thing, you're right. You are avoiding the difficulty there, but you're also sacrificing potentially the most important thing on earth.
wow.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's hard and it's worth it. You have to do it.
You have to do it. You have to do it. So, what's a situation you're proud of? This was a moment that was like, oh, high stakes, crucial conversation. I'm going to gather myself, think about it, and I don't know how it's going to work out, and then it works out. What's one of those stories?
I'm not sure if this necessarily fits the gathering portion, but there was a time in life fairly recently, almost 2 years ago now, when my grandpa was passing, and it was very evident. It was like, this is the end. It could be tomorrow, it could be next week, could be next month, but it's not going to be 3 months. It's coming now. And it was really, really hard on my mom. My mom is really close with her parents, and he had been in failing health for some time. And I was also moving shortly after this. It's like I was moving to Southern California, probably, potentially, right in the middle of it. And I was there for her, and I'm pretty proud about how I was there for her.
Yeah.
I think I did a lot to support her. I think that I helped her with a really hard time in her life just by being kind of a strong pillar and talking her through it. I had a lot of pain myself, and I kind of processed that later afterwards, because at the time, my mom was the one struggling the most, and she needed kind of a strong pillar. And I felt that I was that for her, and I think I did a good job on that one. So I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
That's the one that came to mind first, at least.
Yeah, being grounded, and no, that's good. That's good. We can kind of start wrapping up here. Let's see.
It's been good.
No, yeah.
It's been a very windy conversation.
Yeah.
Covered a lot.
I just try to be curious and wing it. At least
I like it, man.
Right now. Yeah, no,
really
it's good
enjoyed
stuff.
it.
Good stuff. Well, let's see. Okay, so life hack. This could be anything. This is the final question. We'll make this the final question, and then it's Brit Abney. People can follow you, Brit Abney, by the way, for those of you still listening. I wonder how many people are listening right now. Let's take a look. I don't know. Oh, we got some people joined. I don't know. Okay, we'll see. Whatever.
Okay.
Life hack. Besides exercise.
Too easy.
Too
cliche.
Too cliche.
Life hack. So something, just like a general piece of advice that you would recommend to anyone to improve their life.
That you do personally. That you do personally.
Right. Sure. Stoicism. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people think when they hear the word stoic, they think like emotionless, right? Sherlock Holmes, or people that they don't feel, right? And that's not what the underlying philosophy is. The Stoics, for those who haven't looked into it, were actually a set of philosophers in the ancient Greco-Roman world. And their philosophy was not to not feel. Rather, it was to be aware of what you feel, to think about why you feel certain things, and to measure your responses to more appropriately reflect appropriate feelings, right? Look inwards when something angers you. Look inwards when something frustrates you, when something upsets you, and think about why it does. Think about whether it should, right? Obviously, it might upset you in the first 5 seconds, but are you going to let it upset you for the next 10 minutes? Is it something worth letting you be upset for the next 10 minutes or 10 days or however long? And then carefully choose your reaction. Don't let yourself be dominated by your emotions. So it's not to not feel it. It's to just have much more introspection and control over how you react to your emotions. I've been practicing it for about 2 years, and it's been super beneficial. I love it. Several of my friends have been into it too, and they absolutely love it. So stoicism. Yeah.
Stoicism.